So, how often do we really stop and think about the hidden forces, the networks operating just beneath the
Not
surface?
often enough, probably.
Exactly. Today, we're diving into one of those, the Ukrainian Mafia. We've pulled together a lot of information looking at, well, where they came from, what they actually do, and just how far their influence stretches.
Hmm.
And if you're listening because you want to get a handle on complex global stuff like this efficiently without drowning in details, well, that's what we're aiming for here.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And what really jumps out from the analysis is just how fast this whole thing took shape.
right.
We're talking the early 1990s in Ukraine. That seems to be the crucial starting point.
And the trigger was.
Well, the big one was the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you had this huge amount of military gear, weapons just lying around, basically unguarded.
Okay, so you've got this power vacuum, and then
Yeah.
boom, billions of dollars in weaponry just available. What did that lead to immediately for these emerging criminal groups?
The main thing, according to the sources, was a massive surge in illicit international arms trafficking between, say, 1992 and 1998.
Wow.
Yeah, the estimates are wild. Something like $32 billion worth of military stuff vanished from Ukraine.
32 billion.
Hmm. And it wasn't just disappearing, it was being actively shipped out. Places like West Africa, Central Asia.
Yeah.
There are even whispers about Afghanistan, though that's less confirmed.
So this arms trade, that was the seed money, the foundation.
Pretty much. It gave them the capital, sure, but also crucial international connections. Those networks, they built moving guns. They proved super useful later on.
Right, because the information makes it really clear they didn't just stick to weapons, they branched out, like way out. The list of activities huge.
Oh, definitely. It's incredibly broad. You've got the classic stuff, racketeering, extortion, loan sharking.
Mob playbook, yeah.
But then it goes into horrific areas like
Whoa.
human trafficking, sex trafficking, and they became huge players in drug trafficking too. Plus, money laundering, obviously vital.
Gotta clean that money somehow.
Exactly. Moving it across borders, complex schemes. Then there's robbery, bootlegging,
Yeah.
even getting into legit-looking businesses like construction management to hide things.
Construction, interesting.
Yeah, and gambling, bribery, fencing, stolen goods, prostitution, theft, skimming profits, pornography, fraud. It's expensive.
It feels less like a single focus and more like, well, an illicit multinational corporation. Opportunistic.
That's a good way to put it. Strategic diversification, maybe? Maximize profits, spread the risk. The arms money likely bankrolled moves into steadier earners, like drugs or extortion.
And you mentioned that shift from the initial arms dealing to becoming major players in the drug trade, specifically narcotics coming out of Central Asia towards Europe. How did that happen? Was it just using the same routes?
That seems to be a big part of it. The logistics networks, the smuggling routes, the know-how for getting stuff across borders without getting caught.
Skills are transferable, I guess.
Very much so. If you can
Great.
move tanks, you can probably figure out how to move heroin, right? It was a natural, if deeply concerning, evolution.
Now let's talk geography. Because this wasn't just contained within Ukraine or even the old Soviet bloc. Where did they set up shop?
Their footprint is pretty global, actually. Obviously strong in Eastern Europe, former Soviet states,
Hmm.
but also Western Europe, the U.S.
The U.S. comes up a lot. Brighton Beach, Miami.
Yep, those are key hubs mentioned, and Israel as well.
The sources mention something interesting there about waves of Ukrainian Jewish immigration after the Soviet collapse. That while most people were just looking for a new life, some criminal elements kind of piggybacked.
It's a delicate point, but yeah, it seems some individuals with existing criminal ties were part of that migration.
And they used those communities.
It appears they leveraged those diaspora communities, yes,
Mhm.
exploited existing social networks. It's a pattern you unfortunately see sometimes with organized crime. What's striking is how quickly they seem to establish a real power base in places like the U.S. and Israel. Suggests they arrived with a plan, with organization already in place.
And they weren't lone wolves either. The information talks about a whole web of connections, alliances with other big crime groups, like a who's who of the underworld.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The list includes the Russian Mafia, Italy's Camorra and 'Ndrangheta, the Bulgarian Mafia, the American Mafia, Cosa Nostra, Armenian Power, the Triads,
Wow.
Serbian Mafia, Romanian and Israeli groups, even the Sicilian Mafia. It's quite the network.
Are these like formal alliances or more deals of convenience?
Mostly the latter, it seems. Fluid relationships based on what works for a particular deal, sharing resources, maybe access to territory,
Yeah.
collaborating on big international jobs.
The connection with the Russian mafia comes up, specifically mentioning Semyon Mogilevich. Given everything, that feels significant. What kind of collaboration would that involve?
Mogilevich is, well, a major figure. Connections there suggest potentially higher-level stuff, not just street-level cooperation, but maybe strategic alliances, sharing intelligence, tackling really complex international schemes that need muscle and brains across different countries. Not necessarily best friends, but cooperating when interests align.
Okay, let's zero in a bit. When people do talk about the Ukrainian Mafia, one name dominates: the Odessa Mafia. Why are they the most famous or infamous?
A lot of it is down to Odessa itself. The city's history as a Black Sea port, a smuggler's paradise, basically.
Right, location, location, location.
Exactly. After the Soviet Union fell, it became this crucial hub for global trafficking networks, especially, the sources say, for Afghan heroin heading to Europe. That geography gave them a huge advantage.
And the information goes even further back, talking about historical roots of banditry in Odessa, mentioning the large Jewish population there, writers like Isaac Babel. It paints a picture of this being baked into the city's fabric for a long time.
It does. That historical context is important. It shows how local conditions, poverty, maybe even cultural stories can kind of lay the groundwork over generations.
Right.
What started as local gangs, maybe petty theft, gradually got more organized, more sophisticated, especially once they could leverage the port and the new opportunities after 91.
And they didn't stay local for long. The Odessa group, sometimes called the Melina, right? They expanded big time, especially New York, Israel, following immigration waves.
Yeah, that expansion shows their adaptability. They followed the communities, setting up shop in cities with large immigrant populations: New York, Miami, Tel Aviv, Antwerp, Budapest are mentioned.
Makes sense. Ready-made networks.
It helps with recruitment, support, just operating under the radar in a new place.
Let's talk specific people and events. The 90s seemed crucial again. There was this powerful Odessa crew: Alexander Angert, the Don of Odessa, Gennady Trukhanov, who's actually the current mayor,
So the mayor, yeah, that's quite something.
and Nikolai Fomichev. They apparently started in oil, then moved into massive drug and arms trafficking using Italy as a base.
That progression from semi-legit or other industries into the really heavy stuff like drugs and arms seems typical. Angert, Trukhanov, Fomichev. Their story shows that fluidity. And the alleged involvement of Leonid Minin, a known arms dealer, that just highlights the scale they were operating at internationally, right from the early days.
And then there's the U.S. presence. Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. It's almost mythical in crime circles. The sources call the Odessa Group maybe the most powerful post-Soviet outfit in the U.S. And they spread out L.A., San Francisco, Miami, linking up with local Armenian and Israeli criminals.
Brighton Beach was ground zero, really. Huge concentration of Russian speakers, many from Odessa. Perfect environment to rebuild their networks.
And what were they known for there?
Reputation for secrecy, apparently.
Yeah.
But involved in the usual rackets protection, loan sharking, murder for hire, plus narcotics, and notably, fuel tax fraud. That was a big one for a while.
Fuel tax fraud. Okay, didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. Complex schemes to avoid paying excise taxes on gasoline generated massive profits.
And you can't talk about Brighton Beach without mentioning the big names, the sort of folklore figures. Marat Balagula, Evsei Agron, Boris Neifeld. The stuff about the wars between them in the 80s and 90s, Balagula versus Agron, then Neifeld versus Munya Elson. It sounds like movie plots.
It was incredibly violent. Those internal power struggles, fighting over turf, over the rackets, it really shows how ruthless and volatile these groups were.
Builds the reputation, too, I suppose.
Definitely. These guys and their feuds became legendary, shaping the whole image of the Russian-Ukrainian Mafia in the U.S.
It's also interesting how these specific international links keep popping up, like the cigarette smuggling, Ukraine and Eastern Europe to Italy, working with the Camorra to supply Naples.
Yes, that specific example is mentioned.
And it's not just history. The sources say there's recent evidence of the Camorra's Contini clan still working with Ukrainian groups on the same cigarette smuggling routes.
It points to how durable these transnational criminal partnerships can be. They adapt, sure, but the underlying logic cooperation for mutual profit persists across decades and changing political scenes. It really highlights how interconnected the global underworld is.
Which brings us, finally, to popular culture. It seems inevitable that groups like this end up in movies, TV, comics. How does the Ukrainian Mafia show up there?
They definitely make appearances. You see the Odessa mob in Batman comics, for instance.
Batman?
Yep, and they feature in the Russian film Brother 2. There's a character in Lord of War who's a ranking member of a Ukrainian family in L.A.
Lord of War, okay.
Video games, too, the Zakharov Syndicate in Stranglehold. TV shows like Gotham had the Whisper Gang, loosely based on them. Dexter had the Koshka Brotherhood. Banshee featured a Ukrainian mob boss named Rabbit.
So they've captured the imagination to some extent, often sensationalized, I imagine.
Of course, it's entertainment, but it shows they've registered on the public consciousness. It's also interesting, like with Lord of War, the main character Yuri Orlov is widely seen as based on the real-life arms trafficker Victor Bout, who had extensive dealings in the region. So sometimes the fiction gets pretty close to reality.
It's that perceived power, the mystique, I guess.
Mm.
So just to recap some names we've run across. Semyon Mogilevich, Murat Balagula, Evsei Agron, Boris Neifeld. Going further back, Mishka Yaponchik, then Akat Bragin, Alexander Angert, Gennady Turfanov, Nikolai Fomichev, Leonid Minin. Quite a cast of characters.
Each represents a different facet, a different era, or different specialty within this whole complex picture. Leaders, enforcers, financiers, international brokers. Their stories really map the evolution we've been talking about.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've seen this incredibly rapid rise after the Soviet collapse, initially kickstarted by, well, all those weapons lying around.
A huge catalyst.
Then diversification into basically every crime imaginable, establishing a truly global reach and forging connections with, well, pretty much every other major crime group on the planet.
That interconnectedness is key.
And within that, the Odessa Mafia emerges as this particularly powerful, almost legendary force with deep historical roots and a major presence internationally, especially in the U.S.
Yeah, the scale and the global nature of it all are really what stand out. It definitely challenges any idea that organized crime is just a local problem. These are transnational powers.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? This deep dive shows this hidden layer of global influence far beyond what you might normally consider. It kind of begs the question. If this group built such an intricate international web, seemingly out of regional chaos, what other events that look local on the surface might actually have these huge hidden global connections driving them? What does it really tell us about power and who wields it in the 21st century? It's not just governments anymore, is it?
Not by a long shot. These non-state actors, even criminal ones, can have immense, if illicit, influence. It's definitely a complex world out there, something to chew on.